The line at Fresh Value Grocery stretched nearly to the frozen foods section that Tuesday evening. Rain tapped against the windows, matching the tired rhythm of May's heartbeat. Her feet ached in her white nursing shoes as she shifted her weight from one foot to the other. 12 hours on the hospital floor had left her body drained, but her mind still raced with thoughts of her patients. Just 3 more people ahead, she whispered to herself, glancing at her watch. It was already 7:45 p.m., and she still needed to review her notes for tomorrow's shift before she could finally rest. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly, casting everyone in that peculiar bluish-white glow that made even the healthiest person look tired. As the line inched forward, May noticed an elderly woman at the register. She wore a faded blue raincoat that hung loosely on her small frame. Her gray hair was pulled back in a neat bun, though a few strands had escaped, framing a face etched with the lines of a long life. The cashier, a young man with a name tag reading Tyler, scanned the woman's items. A loaf of bread, milk, some vegetables, and what looked like medicine. Nothing fancy, just the basics. "That'll be $23.47, ma'am," Tyler announced, his voice carrying back to where May stood. The elderly woman opened her purse, a well-worn brown leather bag that had clearly seen better days, and began searching through it. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pulled out a small wallet. "I should have enough," she said, her voice wavering just a bit. "I wrote it all down before I came." May watched as the woman carefully counted out bills and coins onto the counter. One by one, she placed them in neat little stacks. $10, $13, $15. Her movements became slower, more hesitant. She recounted twice. "I'm sorry," the woman finally said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "I seem to be short. I could have sworn I had enough." Tyler checked the total again. "You're about $10 short. Would you like to put something back?" The woman's shoulders slumped slightly. She looked at her small pile of groceries, clearly trying to decide what she could do without. Her eyes lingered on the medicine box. Something tugged at May's heart. She had been saving her last bit of money for a much-needed coffee on her way to work tomorrow, but without really thinking about it, she stepped forward. "Excuse me," May said, moving up to the counter. "I can cover the difference." The elderly woman turned, surprise lighting up her tired eyes. "Oh, no, dear, I couldn't possibly." "Please," May insisted, already pulling out her wallet. "It's no trouble." She handed her last $10 bill to Tyler, who took it with a small nod. The woman's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "That's very kind of you. Very kind indeed. Not many people would do that for a stranger these days." "It's nothing really," May said, feeling a warmth spread through her chest that somehow made her tired feet hurt a little less. "My name is Ruth," the woman said, extending a slightly shaky hand. "Ruth Chen." "May Lin," she replied, taking the soft, warm hand in hers. "I will pay you back," Ruth promised, her voice suddenly strong and certain. "I'd always keep my word." May smiled. "Don't worry about it. We all need help sometimes." Ruth collected her grocery bags, her movements careful and deliberate. "Thank you again, May Lin. I won't forget this." As Ruth made her way slowly toward the exit, May watched her go, never suspecting that this small moment, this tiny act of kindness that had cost her nothing but her morning coffee, would completely change the course of her life. By the time May paid for her own few items and headed out into the rainy night, Ruth was already gone. The bus stop across the street stood empty, the rain making silvery curtains under the streetlights. May tucked her grocery bag under her jacket and started the long walk to her apartment, thinking only of a hot shower and her bed. Little did she know that she would see Ruth again, in circumstances neither of them could have imagined, and that $10, the last money she had until payday, would come back to her in ways that would leave her speechless. 2 weeks passed, and the grocery store encounter had faded to the back of May's mind. Life at Pinecrest Hospital continued at its relentless pace. The emergency room was especially busy that Thursday, with 3 car accident victims arriving just as May's shift began. "Lynn, we need you in room 204, called head nurse Tanya, handing May a patient chart. "New admission, heart problems. Dr. Hassan wants vitals every 30 minutes. May nodded, quickly flipping through the chart as she walked down the hallway. The squeaking of her shoes against the polished floor mixed with the usual hospital sounds, beeping monitors, hushed conversations, the occasional announcement over the intercom. Room 204 was at the end of the corridor. May knocked lightly before pushing the door open, her eyes still on the chart. "Good morning, Mrs. Chen. I'm Nurse Lin, and I'll be." May stopped mid-sentence as she looked up. There, sitting propped up against white pillows, was the elderly woman from the grocery store. Her grey hair hung loose around her shoulders now, and her face was paler than May remembered, but those kind eyes were unmistakable. "Well, look at that," Ruth said, her face lighting up with surprise. "It's my grocery store angel." May blinked, momentarily speechless. "Mrs. Chen, Ruth, what are you doing here?" "My heart's been giving me trouble for years," Ruth explained, gesturing to the monitors beside her bed. "Had a bad spell yesterday. Neighbor found me and called the ambulance." May moved forward, slipping easily into her professional role despite her surprise. She checked Ruth's IV line and noted the readings on the monitor. "Your heart rate is a bit irregular, but your blood pressure looks okay for now." "Don't worry about me," Ruth said, waving her hand dismissively. "I've been through worse. Though I must say, seeing you here feels like a good sign. Not many people would give their last money to a stranger." "How did you know it was my last $10? May asked, genuinely surprised. Ruth smiled. "I didn't know for certain, but I suspected. The way you hesitated, just for a second. And your shoes. They're good quality, but worn at the edges. You work hard for your money." May laughed softly. "You noticed all that in our brief encounter?" "I've always been observant," Ruth replied. "Comes from 40 years as a surgeon. You learn to notice details." May nearly dropped the blood pressure cuff she was preparing. "You were a surgeon?" Ruth nodded, a glint of pride in her eyes. "One of the first women in cardiac surgery at Metropolitan Hospital. Started in 1962, when they still thought women were too emotional for such work." She chuckled. "Proved them wrong, didn't I?" Over the next hour, as May checked Ruth's vitals and administered medication, Ruth shared stories from her groundbreaking career. She spoke of surgeries that seemed impossible at the time, of battles with hospital administrators who doubted her abilities, of patients who refused to be treated by a lady doctor. "It wasn't easy," Ruth admitted, "but nothing worthwhile ever is." When May's other duties called her away, she promised to return during her break. True to her word, she came back with 2 cups of tea from the cafeteria. "No family visiting?" May asked, noticing the lack of personal items in the room. Ruth shook her head. "My daughter lives in Australia. My son's in Chicago. They call, but it's not the same as having someone here." "Well, you have me now," May said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Over the next few days, May found herself drawn to room 204 whenever she had free moments. Ruth's stories fascinated her. Tales of medical breakthroughs, of human resilience, of a time when everything in medicine was changing rapidly. "You remind me of myself," Ruth told May one evening. "Smart, dedicated. But there's something else in your eyes when you talk about the doctors." A longing. May looked down at her hands. "I've always wanted to be a doctor, but with student loans from nursing school and my mom's medical bills." She trailed off, then shrugged. "Maybe someday." "Someday," Ruth repeated thoughtfully, her eyes studying May's face. "Yes, perhaps someday indeed." Neither woman realized then how significant that conversation would become, or how their chance reunion was just the beginning of something extraordinary. Days turned into weeks, and Ruth's condition didn't improve as quickly as the doctors had hoped. Her heart rhythm remained irregular, and tests revealed blockages that worried her medical team. Yet, despite her health struggles, Ruth's spirit remained unbroken. May found herself drawn to room 204 more and more. She would bring Ruth fresh fruit from the farmer's market near her apartment or interesting articles from medical journals. On slow nights, May would slip into the chair beside Ruth's bed and listen to stories of surgeries performed during power outages, of medical innovations that seemed like magic at the time, of patients Ruth had saved against impossible odds. "Medicine has changed so much," Ruth said one evening as the sunset painted her hospital room in shades of orange and gold. "But people haven't. They still need the same things: hope, dignity, and someone who truly sees them." May nodded, thinking of her own patients. That's why I became a nurse. I wanted to be that person for someone. And why not a doctor? Ruth asked, her keen eyes studying May's face. I see how you absorb everything the physicians say. How you read medical journals during your breaks instead of scrolling on your phone like the others. May sighed, looking down at her hands. Money, plain and simple. I've got student loans from nursing school still. And Mom's cancer treatments last year. She trailed off, then smiled ruefully. I'm 32. Maybe it's too late anyway. Nonsense, Ruth said firmly. I was 35 when I finished medical school, and people told me I was too old then. If I had listened, she shook her head. Never let anyone put an expiration date on your dreams, May. Their conversations continued like this, day after day. May found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone, her fears about her mother's cancer returning, her small apartment that never quite felt like home, her collection of medical school brochures that she still couldn't bring herself to throw away. Then came the night that changed everything. May had just finished her shift and was about to head home when alarms blared from Ruth's room. She ran, heart pounding, to find a team of nurses and Dr. Patel already surrounding Ruth's bed. Blood pressure's dropping, someone called out. Pulse is weak and Freddie, another voice added. She's going into cardiogenic shock, Dr. Patel said, his voice calm but urgent. We need to get her to the ICU now. Everything moved in a blur after that. Though she wasn't assigned to Ruth's care, May couldn't leave. She followed the team to the ICU, standing back as they worked to stabilize her friend. Hours passed in agonizing slowness. Near midnight, the crisis finally ebbed. Ruth was stable, though still critical. May's shift had ended long ago, but she couldn't bear to leave. She sat in the ICU waiting room, eyes fixed on the clock, jumping every time the door opened. At 3 a.m., Dr. Patel emerged looking tired. He recognized May immediately. You're still here, he said, surprise evident in his voice. She doesn't have anyone else, May explained simply. Dr. Patel nodded. She's stabilized, but it was close. The next 24 hours will be crucial. Can I see her? He hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. Ruth looked small and fragile against the white hospital linens, surrounded by beeping machines. Her skin had a grayish tint that frightened May. Carefully, she took Ruth's hand, mindful of the IV lines. I'm here, May whispered. I'm not going anywhere. To her surprise, Ruth's fingers tightened slightly around hers. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then finding May's face. My grocery store angel, she murmured, her voice barely audible. Save your strength, May urged. Ruth shook her head slightly. Life is too short for saving things, she whispered, including strength. She took a labored breath. I've been thinking about what you told me. About medical school. That's not important right now, May insisted. Getting you better is what matters. Ruth's lips curved in a faint smile. Sometimes the things we think don't matter are exactly what keep us fighting. Her eyes drifted closed again, but her grip on May's hand remained. May stayed long past the 5 minutes Dr. Patel had allowed, holding that frail hand through the night, whispering encouragement when Ruth's breathing became labored, celebrating silently when the monitors showed improvement. By morning, when the sun streamed through the ICU windows, Ruth had turned a corner. And in those long, uncertain hours of the night, something had shifted between them. They were no longer just a nurse and patient, or even friends. They had become family. 3 days after her crisis, Ruth was moved back to a regular room. The color had returned to her cheeks, and though she tired easily, her doctors were cautiously optimistic. May visited every day, sometimes bringing homemade soup in a thermos or fresh flowers to brighten the sterile room. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, May arrived to find Ruth sitting up in bed, looking more alert than she had in days. A stack of papers lay on the rolling table beside her. You're looking better, May said, setting her bag down and pulling up a chair. I feel better, Ruth replied, her voice stronger than it had been. Dr. Patel says I might go home next week if things continue improving. That's wonderful news. May squeezed Ruth's hand gently. Ruth nodded, but her expression was thoughtful, almost serious. May, there's something I want to discuss with you. She gestured to the empty chair. Please sit down. May sat, a small flutter of worry in her chest. Is everything okay? More than okay, Ruth assured her. She took a deep breath. Nearly dying makes a person think about what matters, about what they want their legacy to be. She reached for the stack of papers on the table. I've been making some decisions, important ones. Her fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted her glasses. May, how much would it cost for you to go to medical school? The full amount. May blinked, caught off guard by the question. Well, tuition alone is about $50,000 a year for 4 years. Then living expenses. She shook her head. It's a lot. Why do you ask? Because I want to pay for it, Ruth said simply. The room seemed to tilt around May. What? No, that's impossible. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars. Ruth smiled. I know exactly how much it is. I've looked into it. She tapped the papers beside her. I have the means, May. More than enough. But why? May stammered, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing. Ruth's eyes grew distant. I never had children of my own. My career was my life. I have a niece and nephew who call on birthdays, but she shrugged. My savings have just been sitting there growing. What good is money if you can't use it for something meaningful? But we barely know each other, May protested, though even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. These past weeks had created a bond between them that defied the short time they'd known each other. I know enough, Ruth countered firmly. I know you have the intelligence, the compassion, and the drive to be an exceptional doctor. I know you put others before yourself. You gave your last $10 to a stranger, remember? Her expression softened. But most importantly, I see in you the same fire I had. The same hunger to heal, to make a difference. May sat frozen, her heart racing. This is too much, Ruth. I can't accept something like this. Consider it an investment, not a gift, Ruth said. I'm investing in all the patients you'll help over your career, all the lives you'll touch. She reached for May's hand. When I was starting out, an old professor believed in me when no one else did. He pulled strings to get me a spot in the surgical program when they were turning women away. Now it's my turn to pass that forward. Tears welled in May's eyes. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, Ruth urged. That's all I ask for now. Later that evening, May sat on the small balcony of her apartment, staring at the city lights. Her mind kept returning to Ruth's offer, so incredible it seemed like something from a dream. She thought of her mother, who had worked double shifts as a hotel housekeeper to put May through nursing school. She thought of the medical school brochures hidden in her desk drawer, pages worn from years of handling. She called her mother, explaining Ruth's offer in a voice that shook with emotion. This woman, her mother said after listening quietly, she sees what I have always seen in you. Sometimes blessings come from strange places. Don't turn away because you're afraid or too proud. The next morning, May arrived at the hospital earlier than usual. Ruth was awake, gazing out the window at the rising sun. I've been thinking about your offer, May said without preamble. Ruth turned, her face carefully neutral, and May took a deep breath. If you're truly serious, then yes. Yes, I accept. Her voice cracked. But I need you to know that I'll repay you somehow someday. A smile spread across Ruth's face, brighter than May had ever seen. The only repayment I want is for you to become the doctor you were meant to be. She held out her hand. Do we have a deal, Dr. Lin? Not doctored yet, May laughed through her tears as she took Ruth's hand. Just a matter of time, Ruth replied, her eyes gleaming with certainty. Just a matter of time. The autumn leaves were falling when May submitted her medical school application. By winter, she had received her acceptance letter to State University Medical School. Life changed quickly after that. May reduced her nursing hours to part-time and began preparing for the challenging road ahead. Ruth, meanwhile, had recovered enough to return to her small brick house on Oak Street. The day she was discharged, May helped her settle in, arranging medications on the kitchen counter and stocking the refrigerator with easy-to-prepare meals. I can manage on my own, Ruth insisted, though her steps were still slow and careful. I know you can, May replied, but you don't have to. That became their routine. 3 times a week, May would visit after her hospital shift or between classes. She'd bring groceries, help with light housekeeping, or simply sit and talk while they shared dinner. Ruth's health improved gradually, her strength returning bit by bit like the spring flowers pushing through the cold ground. On a bright April morning, May arrived at Ruth's house carrying a heavy backpack full of textbooks. "I have an anatomy exam tomorrow," she explained, spreading her books across Ruth's dining table. "Do you mind if I study here? My neighbor is having some kind of party." Ruth's eyes lit up. "Mind? I'd love it." She pulled up a chair. "Let me see what they're teaching these days." What began as a one-time study session soon became their new normal. Ruth proved to be an exceptional tutor, her decades of medical experience bringing dry textbook material to life. She had a gift for explaining complex concepts in simple terms, often illustrating her points with stories from her own career. "The heart isn't just a pump," she told May once, placing her hand over her own chest. "It's a storyteller. Every murmur, every irregular beat is trying to tell you something. The trick is learning how to listen." May thrived in medical school, her grades consistently at the top of her class. The work was exhausting, endless hours of studying, practical exams, clinical rotations, but having Ruth as her mentor and supporter made all the difference. Ruth's children, initially suspicious of May's sudden appearance in their mother's life, gradually warmed to her after seeing the genuine bond between the two women. Tom, Ruth's son from Chicago, visited during spring break with his 2 teenage daughters. "I haven't seen Mom this happy in years," he confessed to May as they washed dishes after dinner. "She's always been so independent, we worried about her being alone. Thank you for being there for her." Ruth's daughter Lisa called more regularly from Australia, even sending May a care package of coffee and study snacks during finals week. "Anyone who makes Mom laugh like that is family in my book," she wrote in the accompanying note. Life settled into a rhythm. May studied and worked, Ruth continued to recover and mentor, and their circle of connections grew wider. Ruth's former colleagues from the hospital began stopping by, curious about the young woman Ruth couldn't stop praising. "You've brought life back into this house," Ruth said one evening as they sat on her porch watching the sunset. Her living room had gradually transformed into an unofficial study hall, with medical journals stacked on side tables and anatomy charts, sometimes left hanging on the walls. "You've given me more than I could ever repay," May replied. "It's not just the money for school. It's everything else." She gestured vaguely, struggling to put into words the profound change Ruth had brought to her life. Ruth smiled, understanding what May couldn't quite express. That's how the best relationships work. They're not about keeping score. The summer before May's second year of medical school, Ruth had an idea. "I think we should make this arrangement official," she said one morning over breakfast. "Move in here, May. That apartment of yours is too small, and you spend most of your time here anyway." May nearly choked on her toast. "Move in? But..." "The guest room is already half filled with your books," Ruth pointed out. "And it would make things easier for both of us. I get company and help around the house, you get a quiet place to study and save on rent." After thinking it over for a few days, May agreed. The weekend she moved in, bringing her few belongings in several trips in her old car, something shifted. The house that had once belonged to a stranger she'd helped on a rainy night now felt like home, and the woman who had once been just a patient was now the closest thing to family May had outside of her mother. 3 years into medical school, May hurried home from her clinical rotation, excited to tell Ruth about a difficult diagnosis she had helped identify. She pushed open the front door, calling out as she always did, "I'm home." The house was unusually quiet. May found Ruth in her favorite armchair by the window, an open book in her lap, her reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked up slowly, and May immediately noticed something was wrong. "Ruth? Aren't you okay?" Ruth smiled weakly. "Just tired today, dear." But it wasn't just tiredness. May recognized the pallor in Ruth's face, the slight bluish tint to her lips. Her nurse's instincts kicked in immediately. She took Ruth's wrist, checking her pulse. "How long have you been feeling unwell?" May asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's nothing," Ruth insisted. "I didn't want to worry you during exam week." "I'm calling Dr. Patel," May said firmly, already reaching for her phone. The tests confirmed what May had feared. Ruth's heart was failing. The damage from her previous cardiac episodes had progressed despite medication and treatment. Dr. Patel's face was grave as he explained the situation to them in his office. "We have options," he said, "but at Ruth's age, and with her medical history, none of them are ideal. Another surgery would be extremely risky." Ruth listened calmly, asking clear, precise questions. May marveled at her composure. It was the surgeon in her, May realized, the ability to look at difficult situations objectively, even when the patient was herself. On the drive home, Ruth was quiet, staring out the window at the familiar streets. "I've had a good run," she finally said. 82 years. Not everyone gets that much time." "Don't talk like that," May protested. "We'll fight this. There are experimental treatments, clinical trials." Ruth reached over and patted May's hand. "I know you want to fix this. It's what makes you a good healthcare provider. But sometimes, dear, medicine isn't about fixing. It's about accepting." That night, May couldn't sleep. She sat at her desk, researching treatments, emailing former professors, looking for any option they hadn't considered. Around dawn, she finally collapsed into bed, exhausted. The next morning, Ruth announced her decision. She didn't want invasive procedures or experimental treatments. She wanted to stay at home, with medications to keep her comfortable. "But I have one condition," she added. "You can't put your education on hold." "I won't have that." May wanted to argue, but the determination in Ruth's eyes stopped her. She nodded, though her heart felt like it was breaking. In the days that followed, May rearranged her schedule, coordinating with her professors to attend classes remotely when possible. She set up a hospital bed in the living room so Ruth could look out at the garden. They established a new routine: medications in the morning, breakfast together, then May would study or attend classes while Ruth rested. In the evenings, they would watch old movies or May would read aloud from Ruth's favorite books. Tom flew in from Chicago for a week, helping to organize home health care for the hours when May had to be at the hospital for rotations. Lisa called daily from Australia, sometimes just leaving the video chat open so Ruth could watch her grandchildren play in the background. One evening, as the sunset painted the room in warm golden light, Ruth motioned May closer to her bedside. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice softer than it had been. May sat down, taking Ruth's hand. "I'm listening." "I want you to know my secrets," Ruth said. "The things I've never told anyone." Over the next hours, as night fell and the room grew dark except for one small lamp, Ruth shared stories she had kept hidden for decades. She spoke of her struggles as a young female surgeon, of mistakes she had made and lessons learned the hard way. She talked about patients she couldn't save and how those losses had shaped her approach to medicine. "Always remember that behind every case is a person with hopes and fears," she told May. "Never lose sight of that, no matter how busy you get." As midnight approached, Ruth grew tired but seemed lighter somehow, as if sharing her burdens had eased something within her. "Promise me something," she whispered as May helped her take her evening medication. "Anything." "Promise me you won't live with fear. That you'll take chances, speak up when others won't, fight for your patients." Her eyes, though tired, burned with intensity. "Medicine isn't just a career. It's a calling. Answer it boldly." May nodded, tears spilling onto their clasped hands. "I promise." Ruth smiled, satisfied. "My life came full circle because of your $10, May. Never underestimate how the smallest kindness can change everything." Morning sunlight filtered through the curtains when May checked on Ruth and found her sleeping peacefully, her breathing slow but steady. With a gentle touch to Ruth's forehead, May went to make coffee before her morning classes. When she returned 30 minutes later with Ruth's medication and breakfast, she knew immediately. Ruth had slipped away quietly in her sleep, a slight smile on her face, looking more at peace than she had in weeks. The days that followed passed in a blur. Tom arrived from Chicago the next day, Lisa and her family the day after. They embraced May as one of their own, grateful for the care she had provided their mother in her final days. "She loved you like a daughter," Lisa told May as they sorted through Ruth's belongings. "These last few years with you were the happiest she'd been since Dad passed." The funeral was held on a crisp autumn day at the small chapel near the hospital where Ruth had spent her career. May was astonished by the turnout. Dozens of doctors, nurses, and former patients came to pay their respects, many approaching May with stories of how Ruth had touched their lives. She mentored me when no other surgeon would, a gray-haired doctor told May. I was the only woman in my residency program, and she fought for me to get the same opportunities as the men. She saved my son's life 30 years ago, an elderly man said, tears in his eyes. The other doctors had given up, but she performed a surgery no one else would attempt. After the service, Ruth's lawyer asked the family and May to meet at Ruth's house. In the familiar living room, where they had spent so many hours together, he opened Ruth's will. To my son Tom and my daughter Lisa, I leave my investments and personal belongings to be divided equally between them, the lawyer read. Then he looked up at May. To May Lin, who came into my life through an act of kindness and became the daughter of my heart, I leave my house and the remainder of my estate, with the understanding that a portion will be used to establish the Morgan Wilson Medical Scholarship Fund. May gasped, unable to process what she was hearing. Tom placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. She told us about this months ago, he explained. We fully support her decision. The lawyer continued reading, explaining that Ruth had established a foundation to help disadvantaged students pursue medical careers. The fund would cover not just tuition but living expenses, ensuring recipients could focus entirely on their studies. And she's named you as the foundation's director, the lawyer told May. She was quite specific about this. 5 years later, Dr. May Lin stood on stage at State University Medical School's graduation ceremony. She looked out at the dozen students wearing special gold pins that marked them as the first graduating class of Morgan Wilson scholars. Today marks not just your achievement, but the beginning of a legacy, May told them. A legacy that began with $10 at a grocery store checkout. She touched the small pin on her white coat, a simple number 10 in gold, identical to the ones the scholars wore. Dr. Ruth Chen often told me that medicine isn't just about treating conditions, it's about seeing people. Really seeing them in their moments of vulnerability and need. Mai paused, her voice thick with emotion. Each of you was chosen not just for your academic excellence, but for your ability to truly see others. After the ceremony, May returned to what was now her office at the hospital. On the wall hung her medical diplomas alongside a framed, worn $10 bill in a simple wooden frame. Next to it was a photo of Ruth in her surgical scrubs from the 1960s, looking determined and proud. May's phone buzzed with a text from Lisa in Australia. Mom would be so proud today. Another message followed from Tom, having dinner with a potential donor for the scholarship fund. She was inspired by your story. May smiled, running her fingers over the framed bill. In her other hand, she held the day's mail, applications from next year's scholarship hopefuls. Each one represented another life that would be touched by Ruth's legacy, another chain of kindness set in motion. At the hospital cafeteria later that day, May noticed a young cashier looking embarrassed as an elderly man searched through his wallet, coming up short for his meal. Without hesitation, May stepped forward. "I've got this," she said, handing over the money. "Thank you," the man said, surprised. "I'll pay you back somehow." "No need," May replied with a smile. "Just pass it on when you can." As she walked away, she could almost hear Ruth's voice. Never underestimate how the smallest kindness can change everything.